Okay, starting.
Okay, great. Thanks, Adam. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I met with Kate, I think it was last week or perhaps the week before. She could not be present today and she just asked for some help with facilitating the meeting. I said I'm happy to do that this time, but she did ask us also to discuss just as a task force who would like to chair the meetings going forward. My understanding is that Kate, in reading the bill, did not actually think that a state demographer was the appropriate person to do that on a go forward basis. So I just wanted to throw that out there and potentially look for volunteers or nominations. Unfortunately, I think I'll have some conflicts going forward. So while I'm happy to help today, probably can't do it on an ongoing basis. So just wanted to mention that for everyone and see if anyone had thoughts. I know it's always good to volunteer instead of being voluntold, but Kate probably reserves that right. Okay. Anyway, everyone can think about it and we'll go through the agenda today and then maybe talk about it at the end of the meeting. So just to start, we're looking for a brief update on the Colorado Futures Center research. And so in the agenda that Kate circulated, they were able to either obtain or manufacture the data that was missing that we discussed in our last meeting. I don't know if there's any other updates anyone would like to give related to that. Do we have them on the call today? I don't believe we do. Is that right, Adam? Were they going to join?
We don't have anybody from the Future Center on the call just yet, but when they come up, I'm sure we'll be able to find a couple minutes. So
Sounds great. But essentially, we're expecting to have their findings next month, their preliminary findings, and their final report is expected by the end of March. So with that, I think the ask of our group today is to revisit and summarize the requirements of the original bill. And there was a link in the agenda. I will share my screen and hopefully task force members have that as well and can review. We've covered a lot of area as far as our discussions to date within the task force, but just want to revisit the actual language as we prepare to review findings and talk about the final steps because I think our task force expires in October of this year. So the bill summary that is published can be seen here. And I'll just review the bullet points so we can all think about that and have it in mind as we go forward. So this task force was created to review corporate housing ownership in Colorado, specifically to examine housing ownership by corporate entities and residential real estate transactions by corporate entities in Colorado since January 1st, 2008, including purchases resulting from foreclosures. We were to determine a methodology by which to examine the impacts of corporate acquisition and ownership of residential property with a focus on single-family homes, condominiums, and townhomes. We were to gather and analyze data, reports, and public records related to corporate ownership of housing. We were to make legislative recommendations to mitigate any negative impacts related to corporate ownership of housing that are identified. And we were to report to specified legislative committees certain information concerning the impacts of corporate ownership of housing. So the task force must report its findings to the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee of the House of Representatives and the Local Government and Housing Committee of the Senate or any successor committees by October 1st of 2025. I think that's the key points. We have a little money still in play that we can use to finish our work, and that's part of our agenda discussion today. I'll stop the share for a second and pause. Does anyone have any questions or comments so far? Nope.
Hey, Frankie, I was just going to say, I'm kind of moving ahead a little bit in terms of like item 5 after your review of the bill. And I feel like we've hit everything, obviously, but the recommendations, which is our next step. I think one thing that might be useful for me in order to fully answer the questions that are posed to us in 5 is because it's been such a long time since we were presented with the data and the literature review, the data. I know that the Colorado Future Center's work is coming, but sort of either before or immediately after we receive that, I think it would be nice to have like a recap, like just kind of step back and, because we had such rich information, but it was last summer, last fall, kind of early fall. And I think going back through and maybe, we could all do this on our own, but it might, and we should before we reconvene, but it might be useful just to have like a compilation of everything put out there, sort of this is what we've learned so far. Do we all agree that this is kind of the state of affairs, based on the data and information that we've been presented and that's available to us?
So Heidi, are you referencing specifically the preliminary findings from Colorado Future Center?
Yeah, that plus, the data and the literature reviews that we received last year as well. So the guest
From the various
speakers.
presenters?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sort of a recap of everything that we've learned through the presenters. And I mean, I feel sort of the need to there's so much great academic work that's been provided to, have a little bit of a overview of that too. Sort of what are just the high points? What are the primary findings? That might be something the facilitator could provide, or that, one or two of us could go through and prepare some slides. Just sort of
What does the
a
rest of the task
compilation of
force-
everything we've learned, basically. Yeah.
Okay. What does the rest of the task force think about that?
I second Heidi's
then-
thoughts.
Yeah, excellent idea.
I agree.
So with that, we could do that at a regularly scheduled meeting. I wonder if also more of kind of a study session is what it sounds like to me. And so if you mentioned maybe a couple of volunteers can pull out some summary data from everything we've reviewed, which is pretty extensive, but I know is published to the website for the task force, so it's saved there. Is there anyone who'd be willing to work on that?
Frankie, I just wonder also, it's just so much material. Is there a benefit to splitting it up also and just having us each look at maybe one or two of the materials or presentations provided and provided some summary data?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Let me get in there. Perhaps it would be, I'm trying to think how many we have. 1, 2, 9, 10, 11. So looking at our presentations saved to the task force website, there are 11 of them. Could we, and everybody should have access to that or have that saved? Okay, great. I'll just share my screen to show what I'm looking at here. So our presentations here. What would be the easiest way to divide this up? Do we want to email, do it verbally?
I would suggest doing an outline of the presentations and then the papers and such. So kind of a kind of bibliography. And then my suggestion is then in a shared document, have people volunteer to summarize those pieces of information that they think they can speak to or more interested in providing the summary of. And that would, but if we have that outline, that'll allow us to kind of tag on to those different items.
Okay, great. Adam, is that something your team could create and make available in a shared document?
Yeah, we can certainly, we'll be working in the Google verse, so we'll be able to set that up, and we have some addition. We have also worked through internally summarizing a lot of the articles that we've gotten, so we can make that available too. So,
Okay, yeah,
that'd be
we might
great.
have a starting place. Adam, what's a reasonable time frame for the task force members to look for that? Maybe by the first week of February?
Sure.
Okay,
That sounds reasonable.
great.
To me anyway. I'm sure there are other opinions about that. But
Maybe if we could just plan on that, and if it's not the 1st of February, if you could provide an email update when it is available, and then everyone can take a look at that. So the goal then would be next month to review not only the preliminary findings from Colorado Future Center, but also recapping all of the data the task force has had presented to us in the interim. On our agenda today, Kate had asked or put agenda item 5D to brainstorm a list of legislative recommendations to discuss at future meetings. I feel that kind of goes into agenda item 6 as well, as far as whether we as a task force want to draft proposed legislative recommendations or not, or make the decision not to based on the data presented, or if we would like to engage a facilitator to assist with this final step of our task force assignment. And if the answer is that we want to engage a facilitator, in the email that Kate sent out, there was a proposed draft to request proposals for that. So what are the thoughts of the group related to how we want to proceed?
Well, I'll jump in. I would just say I think it's going to be hard to make to brainstorm those recommendations before we see Colorado Future Center research, because I think that's kind of the ball game is what they're able to find. I imagine there's some certain things that we could preliminarily agree on, things like or find consensus on, things like data reporting and efforts to increase data reporting. But in terms of specific action, I think until we see the CFC report, I think it'll be hard to come up with meaningful suggestions. At least that's the way I view it.
Agreed, absolutely. And maybe I stated that incorrectly. More of what is our desire for the plan of how we want to attack that in the future. Do
Right.
we want to plan on handling that internally as a task force, the next steps? And the reason being, if we want to hire a facilitator, we should probably get a jump on that now as far as looking for someone to engage. So even though we don't have the results, once we have those, does the task force feel that we as a group could develop any formal recommendations that may come of that, or would we want a facilitator to assist with that process?
This is Kinsey. I tend toward the side of hiring a facilitator to help us put that document together and those recommendations. I know that I have missed a few meetings and so apologize, but also wonder, wasn't there a scope of work being worked on or already completed for that kind of facilitator final report writer role?
Yes, so that was provided in the email Kate sent. I believe her recommendation is that we engage a facilitator, but ultimately that decision is up to the task force. So wanting to just get the temperature for that. If we do want to engage a facilitator, the scope of work, she had drafted a scope of work for that we could review and comment on today during this meeting.
Got it.
So,
thank you, Frankie. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree with the recommendation to hire a facilitator then.
And I was gonna say, I think it makes sense to put the request out there and see what kind of response the DOLA and the task force gets. And I think it's worth trying since there's budget associated with it. And I do feel like we're all really busy people, and it would be nice to have a dedicated person, paid person to keep us on track. And certainly be a leader as the recommendations are developed. I think it provides a little more equity when you've got somebody hired to do that versus there's a different ability for us, difference in ability, particularly those of, public sector workers who your jobs really ebb and flow depending on, there's a lot of seasonality to what you do, and winter's a busy time. And so I think that I just want to make sure that everybody has an equal ability to commit to developing recommendations. And for some, having a facilitator may achieve that more than it just falling on us.
Thanks, Heidi. Yes, I would say, does anyone feel differently? Maybe we'll go that route if everyone's generally in agreement. Okay, very good. When I was speaking with Kate, she mentioned we have roughly 50,000 left for our work as a task force, but she recommended budgeting maybe 30,000 of that for the facilitator. So you'll see in the scope of work that she drafted, that was the recommendation. Maybe before we go through a full review of the scope of work, I did see Adam's note that Phyllis joined, I believe from Colorado Future Center. Is that correct? Okay. Phyllis, I was wondering if you would like to give us an update on how things are going.
Yeah, absolutely. I have only a very quick update because Jen has been kind of buried in compiling and formatting all the data for us to be able to start doing the analysis and write our final report. And as of early this week, she has completed that. So I think the biggest lift is largely done. She and I plan to get together either later this week or very early next to start working on the analysis components. And depending upon when is the next task force meeting like mid-February sometime? Is it this week? But I've lost track of whether we're on schedule or this was a different week that we're meeting this month. But if it's toward this end, toward the middle to late of February, we should have preliminary findings. We probably won't have the full report written until, March, but we should be able to give you an update for all the counties discussed with a little bit of a nuance around Pueblo because we couldn't get all the data we needed for Pueblo. And then have some sense of how things have changed from 2015 up to the data we presented that we already had in hand for, I believe it was the last year. So hopefully by February, we would have most everything you would need to add to your conversation about, the other things you've heard through the literature and our earlier report to, to think through how you want to try and structure recommendations and get working on your final report back to the General Assembly. So that's kind of our update. Unfortunately, I don't have anything to show now because now what we have is enormous data sets and pretty much nothing else. So.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that update.
Sure.
I'm glad to hear, and Kate had noted on the agenda she drafted that you were able to either obtain or manufacture data for those key metro area counties. I think we had discussed last where you were having trouble getting information. Was it Jeffco and Douglas?
We were. So they're all covered. The note I got from Jen yesterday was that there was some hitch with Pueblo, which I will apologize that without having gotten to talk to her, I don't fully understand, but she basically said we'll be able to do high level, but maybe not all of the cuts that we can do with the other data. But for everything else, we were either able to, in the last minute, have the data provided, or for a couple of counties, she was able to back create them through sales records.
Okay. Adam, I might, we're jumping around in the agenda, but Phyllis asked about next meeting dates. And I think you were going to lead that discussion a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. So can you all see this? We got 3 responses to the question about changing the schedule, and 1 for Friday morning, 1 for Thursday afternoon, and 1 for Friday afternoon. So we get to brainstorm a solution to this problem. I think there are a couple of choices. Certainly, I'm just going to throw out and get your reaction to. We can certainly maintain the current schedule, or move to, say, Thursday or Friday afternoon. What ideas do you have?
Adam, just speaking for myself, I think, Wednesday mornings are just the absolute hardest for me. I just have regular Wednesday morning meetings almost every week. So I would vote for probably a Thursday afternoon. Friday afternoons, I think would be hard for people that are, maybe leaving early for a long weekend and, we tend to see that being challenging too.
Cool. Any other comments?
This is Kinsey. I will offer that for me, at least, now that we are in legislative session, Thursday afternoons might be tough because there are committees that will be hearing bills on housing on Thursday afternoons. So if that's where the group goes, my attendance might have to be spotty depending on what those committees are hearing.
Okay, I have an N of 2, so let us get some more comments before we go to the next.
Let me ask,
Next
what
question.
about Thursday morning? Are there the same concerns with regard to committee meetings on Thursday morning?
Thanks for asking that. I should look. It probably depends. I'll check though.
I'll just add that Thursday afternoons are hard for me. When we travel for work, I'm often flying back Thursday afternoon. And so I don't think I could do Thursday afternoons in February.
What about say earlier in the week? How is Tuesday afternoon? Is that, are there,
Oh.
complex?
For me,
What?
I will be traveling on Tuesdays.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I go back and forth between Denver and Cambridge. So that's a travel
Okay.
day for me.
It's a bold suggestion, but what do people think about Monday mornings?
Day mornings tend to be open because most people don't schedule meetings right then, but maybe we can make use of that for a few months for this year. That's just my personal schedule.
Do you think that would work for most folks, or even during the lunch hour period on Mondays?
So
It
again,
would
I don't
for
want
me.
the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Leah.
I was
Oh, I was
just
just
saying
gonna say, I think,
for me.
oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I mean, for me, again, I would just, Wednesday mornings are just the hardest, but even if it was moved to late morning would be better, really anything other than 9:30 and Wednesday. But again, I'm happy, anything else I can move around, whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
There were some other comments.
For me, Mondays wouldn't work for me. Again, I can always check the recording afterwards, but I'll be in Boston at that time and teaching.
Any other? So my understanding now is that say Monday mornings wouldn't necessarily work. When, would Thursday mornings or Thursday noon work?
Sounded like that might be a conflict for some, Adam. Is Wednesday late mornings or Wednesday over the lunch hour?
Yeah, well,
Possibility.
Wednesday afternoons or Wednesday lunch.
That certainly works for me. Wednesday afternoon works.
I'm seeing some nods. Can I hear from other folks?
Wednesday afternoon is good for me, Adam.
It's good for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Would work for me too, Adam. This is Cindy.
All right.
This is Kinsey. If it started at noon, I could do it. Wednesday is another afternoon for committees that start at 1:30.
Okay. How about the lunch hour period on Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm seeing positive things. I want to make sure that does this count as a consensus?
Yes.
Anybody? Okay, going once. Any negative comments? Any problems with that period? And we won't say anything about what you're eating for lunch. You'll be fine. Let's give this a shot. What I'll do is I'll send out a summary. When we send out a summary of this meeting through email, we'll mention this time, and then if there's any objections, please let me know through this. But this looks like going to, let's see, there. Okay.
And Adam, we apologize for being poor poll responders for your meeting schedule, since only 3 of us responded and none of us for the time we just decided on.
Well, look, we're all data people or data adjacent. We know that response rates are terrible. So that's fine,
We appreciate your understanding.
Okay, thanks. All right, I'll give you this meeting back now.
Sounds good. And Heidi just put a very insightful comment into the chat for everyone. Unless that was just direct. I think it was to everybody. This is why we need a facilitator. So thank you, Heidi. Agreed. All right, well, we will jump back to our agenda. So we chose the day and time, but I think Phyllis was asking as well the time of the month. So will this, Adam, be the last Wednesday of each month or the third Wednesday?
Well, let me ask, is there any preference about when during the month? So let's try the last Wednesday of the month.
Okay.
And then if that doesn't work, we can adjust that.
Okay, very good. So Phyllis, if we're looking at the last Wednesday in February, is that sufficient for you to be able to present the preliminary results?
Yeah, I mean, from what I know now, I fully expect that would be great. So thank you. I was a little worried you might say the second February month or week, and that might be tight for us. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. I think now we can jump back to the draft scope of work for a potential facilitator. And Adam, did you work with Kate on drafting this? Is this perhaps something you want to share and kind of walk through?
Yeah, we have, one of the original intents, I think, of having a facilitator was to get public comment about the situation generally, and as it relates to our work in particular. So I think one of the intents is that there will be some sort of public meeting to discuss things that the facilitator would help summarize. And that was my understanding earlier. I think that's still in there, but I'm not entirely sure.
So, yes, it looks like maybe objective number
Yeah.
2. Our meetings are public, aren't they? These are
Yes,
open
they
to
are.
the public
They are.
on there. So you're saying something besides our task force meeting?
I think that was the original intent, is to have, the term public forum comes to mind, but that may not be exactly what happens. I, recognize that there's some budgetary and timing limitations in doing a full-throated series of focus groups, right?
Right.
But we kind of decided to let the respondents to the scope of work propose something. And then the other major component of this is publishing the final report, and that will integrate the materials that we're going to be talking about in the next month, we talked about earlier today, and the materials from Colorado Future Center and then I suspect there will be a process of developing recommendations that I think will be really crucial that everyone contribute to. and that the facilitator will help move this forward to the final product. Well, that's my understanding of this. I hope I'm hitting all the points.
Thoughts or comments from the group?
Just a question, is the facilitator's scope of work also include writing the report? Or is it more just facilitating the discussion and helping?
It
to
is
draw-
right. It's producing the report. Yeah.
So on that subject, one of the things in what Kate sent out in her email is she has verbiage about assistance in drafting the final report. And she had a question about whether we would like the facilitator to draft or complete the final report, or only submit a draft that the task force can edit.
This is Kinsey. On that point, this is just based on previous similar experiences. If the facilitator has capacity, I think it would be great for them to draft it, provide a certain amount of time for task force member feedback and comments, and then for the facilitator to be responsible for integrating those. And that it would be better for a third party to do that along the lines of Heidi's rationales earlier. And before I jump off, I just wanted to also share, I really appreciate the idea of the facilitator convening a public forum for folks who aren't part of the task force or haven't had the chance to present, to share their experiences or thoughts. And in previous committees that I've served on, a facilitator also opened like a Gmail email box that was open for some period of time, where organizations or individuals could submit written public feedback or comments on, the issue at hand. And that worked pretty well too, especially if we're considering time constraints.
Appreciate that. Any other thoughts from the group? Very good. Adam, I have the document pulled up, and it looked like Kate had one other question she was looking for input on. And it has to do with what you brought up on communicating and obtaining input from groups throughout the state affected by issues identified by the task force. She wants to know if the task force would like to specify affected groups. Submitting a focus group discussion guide and specifying what types of session documentation would be required. For example, a summary of input, transcripts, recordings. And everyone has that by email, but I can share my screen if that's helpful.
Yeah. So let me just jump in on that, because if, in the case where we have some sort of public meeting, I think having the documentation of that meeting is going to be very important. In the situation where that's a hypothetical, where we have multiple formal focus groups, being able to get people's comments verbatim, through a transcript, and additionally through a recording, would be very helpful in putting things into context, right? If you do less than that, certainly you would want to make sure that the submitted emails or submitted documentation from other groups is accounted for and summarized. So we would, need to facilitate that, and really kind of require that as part of the of any contract that we enter into. Some of the more informative things in our literature review have been these testimonials, and I think making sure that we have a process to capture those is going to be important.
That seems to make sense to me. Does anyone disagree with including that in the scope of work?
The only thing I would add is I think it's important to have the opportunity for somebody to be anonymous, just given the heightened concern around I mean, just a couple things with the new presidential administration that may give people pause, like you know, a call for all contractors, federal contractors who have engaged in DEI work, concern, you know, with, I think undocumented people are going to be increasingly nervous to express opinion in a public setting. And so just making sure that there is an opportunity for people who may be affected by any kind of decision or recommendations that we make to have a fair shot at making comments without feeling like they're going to be exposed in some way. And a lot of times we'll do that through like trusted parties. So a stakeholder, you know, leading a nonprofit would be the voice of the people who maybe are not comfortable sharing their opinion. But typically what we do is when we're collecting public comment is allow people to send an email and then promise them that it will be held confidential. Like we're not going to put their email address out there to the world if they recommend that they'd like to be anonymous, or if they suggest they'd like to be anonymous. So I would just want to make sure that that's for folks.
Well, my understanding is that that is fairly standard practice. You know, particularly, for example, in a focus group setting, you do not have name tags and name tents, right? And that information, you do your best to keep the identity of the participants separate from the process of the group. And if this is a concern, certainly we have the opportunity to make that explicit in the scope of work. Certainly that's that is, if we go down this path, that's something that we can do. It's also possible to collect written responses anonymously without having to go through an email account, and that may be an approach that you want to work with. But you know, I take your point, Heidi, but we also have a lot of experience making sure that people's identities are protected. So
Thank you, Heidi, for bringing that up, and Adam for your comments. I made a note just on the document that Kate sent, so I can send back to you, Adam and Kate, with just the comments from the task force group there. The final question Kate had for us in reviewing this draft was whether we want to use BidNet. She said it is not required if the expenditure amount for the contract is less than $50,000, and that her office does have a short list of recommended facilitators who have assisted other legislative task force commissions and committees that she can circulate to if that's our desire. She said BidNet would allow for a wider reach beyond this list. Any thoughts from the group?
I mean, I would just say I use BidNet. So I would just say if it's easy to post it, post it. You know, I don't think there's any harm in it. It might require more proposal reviews, but it seems fair to put it out there more broadly.
Anyone disagree? No. Adam, my only question would be, does her short list from your office, would they also see what goes out on BidNet?
certainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
you know, I think that's what we did with the previous scope of work, you know, request.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Make a note that we prefer BidNet. Great. Well, thank you everyone for your input and your comments on that. I will jump back to our agenda for today, and I think we've actually covered all of the items that we were requested to discuss. So I'll just open it up for general comments from the task force. Anything else anyone would like to bring up today? Cynthia, Lori, both Loris, you guys have it? Been a little quiet today. Anything you'd like to bring up? No? Okay.
I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Great. And I don't know if we have anyone on from the public, Adam?
Yeah, we do. We have one public attendee, and if you have any comments, please raise your hand and we'll give you the floor. Okay, I think we are good to go.
Thank you so much. So just to recap, next meeting dates, the last Wednesday in February would be the 26th. So if everyone can pencil in the 26th at noon, and then Adam, I'm sure will send calendar appointments with the meeting details. Thank you all for your time today. I forgot the last item. Do we have any volunteers to facilitate next month's meeting? No volunteers. Do you want to draw a name out of a hat, Adam, and you can contact that person?
How about Teo?
Wait a minute, he doesn't have.
As I say, that was fast.
Yeah, well, you know,
That's fine. I'd be glad. I'd be glad to do
the
it.
hat is off screen
I see.
here.
I would certainly. I'd be glad to. Like Frankie, I will. I'll consider an interim role, but I'll be glad to take the torch.
Okay.
But I'm bringing a
Thank
hat
you so
next
much.
time, so
Sure,
beware.
you know, it's fine. It's
But
fine.
Adam, we'll touch base offline.
Sounds
Thank
great.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Definitely appreciate your time and hope everyone has a great day.
Bye, everyone. Take
Thanks,
care.
Frankie.
Bye-bye.